I left town for 2 days, just two, and when I came back, someone had built an entire road across my land. Not near it, not accidentally over the line. I'm talking a full-on gravel road cutting straight through my pasture like they were claiming territory in a video game. Like I didn't exist, like my name wasn't on the deed, and the craziest part? They acted like I was the problem. Yeah, that kind of neighbor. So let me back up a second, because this didn't just come out of nowhere. I've owned this property for a while now, about 15 acres out in what used to be quiet ranch country, the kind of place where people mind their business, fix their own fences, wave when they drive by, and don't, under any circumstance, touch land that isn't theirs. It's kind of an unspoken rule. You don't even need a sign for it. You just know. The land's flat, clean, perfect for grazing, and more importantly, it's clearly marked, old fence posts running along the boundary like they've been there longer than most of the houses in the area. Nobody gets confused about where my property begins, unless they're trying to. Now, about a month before all this happened, this couple moves in next door. We'll call them Trevor and Lacey. Came in from out of state, big city energy, paid cash for the place like it was nothing, which around here immediately makes people raise an eyebrow. Not because it's illegal or anything, but because it usually means they're not used to how things work out here. And sure enough, within the first week, they were already asking questions that told me everything I needed to know. First time I actually talked to Trevor, I was out fixing a busted fence panel. Routine stuff, nothing dramatic. And he walks over, hands in his pockets, looking around like he's surveying land he hasn't quite decided how to use yet. And he goes, "Hey man, quick question. Where exactly does your property line run?" And I remember pausing for a second, because it wasn't a weird question on its own, but the way he asked it, like he wasn't asking for clarity, more like he was checking limits. So I pointed right at the fence line, those old posts I mentioned, and I told him straight, everything north of that line, that's mine, always has been. He nodded, smiled, that polite kind of smile people give when they're pretending to agree but already thinking something else, and he goes, "Got it, good to know." Then he just walks off. Conversation over. And I remember thinking, okay, maybe they're just new. Maybe they're learning the area, no big deal. But something about that interaction stuck with me, like a splinter you don't notice until later. Fast forward about 3 weeks, everything's normal, no issues, no drama. I leave for a short trip, family stuff, nothing urgent. And when I come back, I'm halfway down my own driveway when I hit the brakes so hard my truck practically jolts forward, because what I'm looking at doesn't make sense. It just doesn't. There's a road. A brand new gravel road. Wide, clean, professionally laid. I'm talking about 20 feet across, perfectly graded, compacted, edges trimmed like someone knew exactly what they were doing. And it's not just near my property. It's on it. Deep on it. Like, no gray area, no, oops, we misjudged the line. This thing is carved a solid 50, maybe 60 feet into my land, starting from the main road and curving neatly into Trevor and Lacey's yard like it belongs there. And for a split second, just a second, I genuinely think maybe I pulled into the wrong place. Maybe I zoned out on the drive and took a wrong turn. But then I see my fence posts, my gate, the exact same tree line I've seen 1,000 times. And it hits me all at once. They didn't make a mistake. They made a decision. So I grab my phone, call Trevor immediately, and he picks up like everything's normal, like we're about to chat about the weather or something, and he goes, "Hey, you back already?" And I'm just staring at this road, trying to process how someone even does this without asking, without thinking, and I say, "Yeah, I'm back, and I see your new driveway." And he actually laughs a little, like he's proud of it, like he's expecting a compliment, and goes, "Pretty nice, right?" Makes access way easier. And that's when I say it, just flat, no emotion, because I'm trying to keep things from escalating. It's on my land. There's this brief pause, not long, just enough to show he heard me. And then he goes, "Well, yeah, the contractor mentioned your fence wasn't exactly straight, so we adjusted a bit, just shifted it onto the flatter side, better drainage." A bit. He said, a bit, like we're talking about inches, like he didn't just carve a road through someone else's property. And I feel that heat start to build, that kind of anger that doesn't explode right away but sits in your chest, heavy, controlled, and I go, "You didn't adjust anything. You crossed the line. That's my pasture." And then his tone changes, not aggressive, not yet, but dismissive, like I'm the inconvenience in this situation. Look, man, it's already done, okay? And honestly, you weren't using that section for anything. It's just grass. Just grass. That's when I knew this wasn't confusion. It wasn't a mistake. It was entitlement. Plain and simple. I tell him, it's still my land. I've got the survey to prove it. And he lets out this sigh, like I'm wasting his time, like I'm the one being unreasonable here. And he says, then take it to court if it's that big of a deal. But the road's not going anywhere. And that, right there, that sentence, that's the moment this stopped being a neighborly issue and turned into something else entirely. Because now it wasn't just about land. It was about someone deciding the rules didn't apply to them and expecting me to just accept it. And yeah, I could have argued more on the phone. I could have driven over there, made a scene, yelled, threatened, all that. But I didn't, because something told me this needed to be handled differently, not louder, smarter. So I hung up, sat there in my truck for a minute, just looking at that road cutting across my land like a scar, and I made a decision. If they wanted to play this like it was nothing, I was going to show them exactly what it cost. All right, let me pause the story for a second, because what happened here? This wasn't just some random neighbor being clueless. This was a textbook case of how people walk themselves into legal trouble while thinking they're being practical. According to standard procedure, anytime you're building anything near a property line, fence, driveway, shed, whatever, you get a survey, not eyeball it, not ask the contractor. You get an actual verified boundary, because the second you cross that line, intentionally or not, you're in trespass territory, and trespass, especially with permanent structures, escalates fast. We're talking liability, damages, sometimes even court-ordered removal. From a legal perspective, Trevor didn't just make a mistake, he doubled down on it. And that's where things get expensive, because once he was notified, clearly, that the road was on my land, the clock started ticking. Every day that road stayed there, that's ongoing trespass, and courts don't like that at all. But here's the part most people miss. This is a psychological trap. See, when someone invests money into something, like building a road, they start justifying it. Even if they know they're wrong, it's called escalation of commitment. The more they spend, the harder it becomes to admit they messed up. So instead of fixing it early, when it's cheap, they dig in, argue, deflect, and eventually end up paying way more than they ever would have if they just handled it right the first time. And Trevor? Yeah, he was already deep in that trap. So the next morning, I didn't waste time. No dramatic confrontations, no back-and-forth arguments over the fence. I drove straight into town and sat down with a local attorney. Guy named Daniel Cross. Not flashy, not one of those billboard lawyers, just a quiet, detail-oriented type who's been handling land disputes in this county longer than most people have lived here. The kind of guy who doesn't react much, which, in situations like this, is exactly who you want. I handed him everything I had: property survey, deed, photos of the road, timestamps, and he didn't interrupt once, just nodded, flipped through the documents, pulled up some county records on his computer, zoomed in on aerial maps, overlaid the parcel lines, and after maybe 10 minutes, 10 calm, quiet minutes, he leaned back slightly and said, "They're not close, they're way over." Not close, way over. And I remember asking him, "So what does that mean for me?" Because at that point, I already knew I was in the right. I just needed to know how far I could take it. And he looked at me and said, T means you don't argue, you document, and then you enforce. Simple as that. So we did it by the book. No shortcuts, no gray areas. Daniel drafted a formal notice, certified mail, signature required, stating clearly that Trevor and Lacey had 10 days, 10, to remove the road entirely and restore the land to its original condition. Not partially fix it, not adjust it again, remove it completely. And we didn't just send a letter. We attached everything: survey maps, photographic evidence, legal citations, the kind of packet that doesn't leave room for interpretation. It says, in very polite legal language, "You're wrong, and here's proof." Now here's where most people would pause, maybe hope the neighbors come around, maybe try to smooth things over. But I wasn't interested in hoping. I was interested in resolution, because Trevor had already made his position clear. Take it to court. And when someone tells you that, you take them seriously. So we waited. Day 1, nothing. Day 3, nothing. Day 7, still nothing. Roads sitting there like it belongs, gravel packed down tighter every day, tire tracks running across my land like a reminder that they didn't care. Day 10 came and went, no call, no attempt to fix it. Not even a conversation, just silence. And that silence? That was their answer. So on day 11, we acted. I hired a professional crew, not some guys with shovels and a pickup truck. I'm talking full equipment, graders, loaders, dump trailers, the whole setup. If this road was going to be removed, it was going to be done clean, fast, and documented. And before anything started, Daniel made one more call. He notified the county sheriff's office, not because we were expecting trouble, but because when you're dealing with people who've already ignored legal notice, you don't leave things to chance. You make sure everything is on record. We also filmed everything, every angle, every step, because if this ended up in court, and at that point, I was pretty sure it would, I wanted zero ambiguity about what happened. The crew showed up early, engines rumbling, dust kicking up as they rolled onto my property, and for a second, I just stood there watching, because there's something surreal about seeing something that shouldn't exist about to be erased. Then it started. The first blade cut into the gravel near the main road, scraping, lifting, peeling that clean, artificial layer off my land, and it was almost satisfying in a way I didn't expect, like undoing a mistake that never should have been made. Load by load, they worked their way down, scooping up every inch of that road, not leaving patches, not cutting corners. Everything came up, gravel, base layer, compacted dirt, all of it. And here's the part that felt poetic, I guess. We didn't haul it off to some landfill. No, every single load, every last chunk of gravel they had brought onto my land, went right back to where it came from. Their property. Specifically, right at the edge of their driveway. By mid-afternoon, there was a growing pile, then a mound, then basically a wall of gravel sitting right in front of their entrance like a physical reminder of what happens when you build on something that isn't yours. And just as the crew was finishing up the last pass, regrading the soil, smoothing everything out, prepping it for reseeding, that's when Trevor and Lacey pulled in. Perfect timing. Their truck slowed as they approached, probably confused at first, because the road they had been using, the one they thought was permanent, was gone. Completely gone. Trevor jumped out before the truck even fully stopped, face already red, walking fast. No, not walking, storming, straight toward me. And he starts yelling before he's even close enough for a conversation. What the hell is this? What did you do? And I didn't raise my voice, didn't match his energy. I just stood there, calm, and said, I removed the road from my property. That set him off even more. You can't just destroy someone else's construction. That cost us thousands. And there it was again, that word. Someone else's, like he still didn't get it, like reality hadn't caught up with him yet. So I reached into my truck, pulled out a copy of the notice, along with the signed court authorization Daniel had secured just in case, and I handed it to him. You had 10 days, I said. You chose not to do anything. He grabbed the papers, barely looked at them, just crumpled the edge slightly as he kept talking, louder now, angrier, throwing around words like illegal, lawsuit, you're gonna regret this. The usual script when someone realizes they've lost control of the situation. Lacey stayed back near the truck, arms crossed, not saying much, but you could see it in her face, that shift, that moment where the confidence they had before started cracking. Because this wasn't a debate anymore. This was done. The crew finished up, packed their equipment, and drove off, leaving behind a restored pasture, fresh soil, clean lines like the road had never existed, except for that massive pile of gravel sitting at the edge of their property like a monument to bad decisions. And for a few days, it was quiet. Too quiet. Then came the lawsuit. Trevor filed a claim, $14,000, construction costs, damages, unauthorized removal of property, which, I'll admit, almost made me laugh when I read it, because the irony was unreal. But here's the thing. Once you're on solid legal ground, cases like that, they don't last long. We went to court, presented everything, survey, photos, timeline, the notice, proof of delivery, the video footage of the removal, all of it laid out clean, chronological, undeniable. Trevor tried to argue that the boundary was unclear, that the contractor advised them, that they acted in good faith, but none of that holds up when the evidence says otherwise, especially when you were given a chance to fix it and chose not to. The judge didn't take long. Case dismissed. Just like that. And not only was it dismissed, Trevor was ordered to cover my legal fees, plus additional damages for the disruption to my land, reseeding, soil repair, everything. And the look on his face when that ruling came down, it wasn't anger anymore. It was realization. The kind that hits when everything you thought you could get away with collapses all at once. And me? I just walked out of that courtroom, same way I walked in, calm, quiet, because at the end of the day, this was never about revenge. It was about boundaries and making sure they were respected. So yeah, that's how it ended. No dramatic showdown, no shouting match in the street, no last-minute apology or handshake. Just paperwork, patience, and consequences, and honestly, that's usually how these situations play out in the real world, not with a bang, but with a quiet, undeniable shift where one side realizes they pushed too far. And if there's one thing I took away from all of this, it's this. Boundaries don't mean anything unless you're willing to enforce them. Because here's the truth. Most conflicts like this don't start with someone trying to be a villain. They start with small assumptions, little justifications. It's just a few feet. They're not using it. It won't matter. And then those thoughts stack up until someone convinces themselves they're entitled to something that was never theirs to begin with. The lesson here is that mindset. It's dangerous, not just legally, but socially. Because once you cross that line, literally or figuratively, you're forcing the other person into a position where they have to respond, and how they respond. That determines everything that comes next. Now let's talk about the legal side for a second, not in a boring, textbook way, but in the way you actually need to understand it if you ever find yourself in something like this. From a legal perspective, ownership isn't a suggestion. It's a documented, enforceable right, and it doesn't matter if someone didn't know, or if a contractor gave bad advice. Responsibility doesn't disappear just because the mistake was convenient, especially when there's proof, and especially when you've been given the opportunity to fix it. And that's the part a lot of people get wrong. They think the real risk is getting caught, but it's not. The real risk is what happens after you're notified, because once you know you're in the wrong, every decision you make after that carries weight, legal weight, financial weight, sometimes even reputational weight in your community. According to standard procedure, disputes like this are supposed to de-escalate early. You verify the boundary, you communicate, you correct the issue, done. No drama, no court dates. But when someone ignores that process, when they double WN instead of backing off, that's when the system steps in, and the system doesn't care about ego. And let's be real for a second, this wasn't just about a road. This is a psychological trap, and it happens way more often than people realize. Trevor didn't wake up one day thinking, I'm going to build on someone else's land. What happened was slower. He made an assumption. Then he spent money on that assumption, and once that money was spent, his brain flipped into defense mode. Because admitting he was wrong would mean admitting he wasted thousands of dollars, and for a lot of people, that's harder than just digging in deeper, arguing, rationalizing, even when the evidence is right in front of them. It's called escalation of commitment, and it's brutal, because the more you invest in a bad decision, the more you feel like you have to protect it, even if it's costing you more in the long run. And that's exactly what happened here. He could have fixed it early, probably would have cost him a fraction of what he ended up paying. But instead, he chose pride over practicality, and the bill came due anyway, just with extra fees attached. Now here's the part that might not be obvious, and it's probably the most important takeaway of all. You don't have to be aggressive to be effective. I never yelled, never threatened, never made it personal, and that wasn't because I didn't feel it. Trust me, I did, but reacting emotionally in situations like this, it usually makes things worse. It gives the other person something to push against, something to argue with. Instead, I stayed consistent, documented everything, followed the process, and let the system do what it's designed to do. And that's something people underestimate all the time. They think strength looks like confrontation, like being louder, tougher, more intimidating. But real leverage? It's being right, and being able to prove it. Now if you're listening to this and thinking, okay, but what would I do in that situation? That's a fair question, and honestly, it depends. Every case is different, but the core principles stay the same. You verify your position, you communicate clearly, you give the other party a chance to correct it, and if they don't, you act. Not out of anger, but out of clarity. Because at the end of the day, Letting something slide like that, it doesn't make you easygoing, it sets a precedent, and once people think they can take a little, they usually try to take more. And that doesn't just apply to land, it applies to everything. Respect, boundaries, agreements. They only hold value if both sides recognize them. And if one side doesn't, then it's up to the other to decide where the line actually is. So yeah, that's my story. No explosions, no dramatic revenge arc. Just a guy who came home to find a road where it didn't belong and decided to remove it the right way. But I'm curious, what would you have done? Would you have handled it the same way, gone through the legal route, played it slow, let it build? Or would you have confronted them right then and there, face to face, risked it getting messy? Because situations like this, they say a lot about people. Not just the ones who cross the line, but the ones who decide what to do about it.